Well, welcome to the beautiful surroundings of Missenden Abbey. This wonderful and delightful building has been the home of the annual Railway Modellers Weekend for the last 25 years, and it's to celebrate our 25th anniversary that we're having this promotional DVD made. I first came here in the 1980s when the course was run by Harry Drummond and Keith Arms. Later it was taken on by Dick Ganderton, and in 1996 Martin Brent started to organise these courses. He changed the whole emphasis from sitting down and chatting to a very practical weekend course and brought in additional tutors. The idea was that people could make a model and have an uninterrupted weekend of railway modelling in some absolutely delightful surroundings. Missenden Abbey during the day is a management training centre, and as such has wonderful facilities and very well appointed bedrooms. And on a weekend like this we take over the whole of the Abbey and just enjoy ourselves free from domestic interruption. We just get on and build our models. We're very fortunate to have some excellent tutors, and during this video you will see the tutors in action teaching our students how to build models. The nice thing here is you can get on, build it, and if you have a problem you put up your hand and one of our tutors will come and help you. I'd like to introduce Bob Alderman. Bob's been a tutor here since 1996 and is a very prolific writer. Bob has been instrumental in helping produce the Missenden manual on CD-ROM. And Bob usually looks after the kit preparation and the soldering techniques. Soldering causes a lot of problems for a lot of people, and Bob's very good at teaching people how to solder. Bob, when people start, what would you advise them when they open a kit for the first time?
Take a good look at all the parts, make yourself very familiar with the contents of the box before ever attempting to join parts together, however tempting that may be. Similarly, instructions frequently get taken out, discarded or lost. They are important, even if they aren't well written. Once you've chosen your loco, which one you want to make, as much prototype information as you can get.
So they should bring pictures with them?
Pictures with them, and pictures of the period when the loco is, when you're making it. Something that was built in the 1930s, but running in the 1950s, is not necessarily the same beast. There will be detail changes, so pictures appropriate to the time that you're making the model.
That's very good advice. Now on these courses we've seen people having difficulty with soldering. As soldering is the fundamental technique of railway modelling, what advice would you give to people about soldering?
It is very simple, but the usual problem is the equipment. The soldering iron is probably not big enough for the job in hand. The more heat you have available to do the job, the quicker and easier it is. A sure sign that your iron is inadequate is that you had a model that's getting hotter and hotter and hotter till you can't hold it and you still haven't made the joint.
Thank you very much indeed, Bob.
Okay.
As we can see, most of the models here are quite happy getting on building their chassis and locomotives, but Bob is on hand to help anybody who has some problems. The usual problems are soldering and making chassis run smoothly. This is usually a problem with connecting rods and valve gear. I'd like to introduce you now to Burton Chalmers. Burton's been coming here for 15 years, I think.
About that, yes.
And was always come along with an exquisite 7mm model. This year he's surpassed himself with this brilliant model of a Bear Garrett. Perhaps, Burton, you can tell us a little bit about the model and the fun that you had building it.
Yes, well, it's a JM Models kit, and I've made quite a few of their models in the past, and they're usually very reliable and come together nicely, and this was just the same. You have a choice of either a rectangular coal bunker or a round one, a rotating bunker, and that's the rotating bunker, which is slightly more difficult to make, but an interesting challenge. It doesn't in fact rotate, but it has the appearance of doing so. And really the most difficult thing was, once it was assembled, getting it all working satisfactorily, particularly because of these lubricators, which are quite small. There are two on each side, and they move backwards and forwards with the motion, with the gear motion. And it took a little bit of experimenting to get that going, but it does run quite satisfactorily at the moment. Getting ready to put it out in the garden shortly and see how it goes.
So you run this on your garden railway?
Yes, indeed, yes. Yes, it gives it a good run. It can stretch its legs a bit. And getting the lubricating, the rocking lubricators working was quite a problem. And the rotating bunker. In fact, there's a cloth which connects the rotating bunker to the cab there. That was slightly difficult position because it moves all the time as the...
The bunker actually rotates, isn't it?
It could do, but it doesn't. Any rotation that it achieves is involuntary.
When Martin died in 2000, Tim Watson stepped in as a replacement instructor. Tim is a very well-known modeller, and he was the man behind the 2mm layouts of Copenhagen Fields, based on North London, and the picturesque Chiltern Green. Here we see Tim demonstrating soldering to a group of modellers at the Abbey. In October 2007, Tim will be teaching 2mm locomotive kit construction with Bob and Tony doing the 4 and 7mm locomotive kit construction. In the barn hall we have the chassis clinic run by Mike Sharman. Mike has been with us since 1996 and was one of the original tutors brought in by Martin Brent. This is a very popular session on the March weekend and is usually oversubscribed. In fact, this has now become too much for Mike, and this year he's joined by Ian Rice, a very old friend of his and some might say a partner in crime, and we'll be talking to both of them soon. Building a reliable working chassis is the key to locomotive kit construction. Most modellers actually want to build a unique locomotive of one for another, and who better than Mike and Ian to help them on the way. Hey Mike, perhaps you could just tell us why you started off building these pre-1870 locomotives.
Well, I went through the usual build-up into modelling of Hornby 00 and then started cutting perfectly good 00 things up to make something else. And I was reading an article in Model Railway News where a chap had got a big engine shed and he got this single-wheel Great Northern locomotive, which he said, it looks really pretty but it won't pull anything. And that got me thinking, why? Can we balance this or weight that? And I started thinking in terms of single-wheelers, how to balance them, how to get them to work. And it all evolved from that. I was attracted to that era then because they were the 1870s. And from there started working backwards as I developed systems, different ways of hanging the locomotive, of hanging the tender on one end for weight, which made the wheels grip better. There's this kind of thing, all basic, nothing very rocket science about it, but you evolve it over time and get it to work. This one is christened Max Mangle. It's a London North Western locomotive. McConnell built it, and when it went charging around the railway system, the cylinders were too wide and they took the edges off all the platforms, hence the mangle. But when he changed the cylinders inside, it became the Bloomer class, which were very, very good engines that went on for a long time. And looking at it, we've got the driving wheels here, we've got the rear wheel pivoted, because everything's based on the three-legged milking stool. In other words, you can't fall off it because it's three-legged and it doesn't matter what the ground's like. A lightly sprung front axle, so we've got permutations. And then the tender, these wheels are cosmetic, so the tender's resting, two wheels there solid, and the centre pivot point on the locomotive. So with the front of the tender full of lead, it's resting, balancing the back out, and most of your weight is balanced across those driving wheels, hence you get perfectly good usable traction for quite reasonable sized trains.
And that's able to pull a reasonable load?
Oh yes. We're looking at the little four-wheel coaches of the day. I mean, that would pull a dozen.
A dozen coaches, that's good.
Well, this is an accidental loco, wasn't it?
Yes.
from somewhere or the other, we had got a pair of very, very nice one-to-one helical final drive gears, which was small enough to go underneath the footplate without showing, of an open cab loco. So we thought, oh, this is an opportunity to do something a bit different here. So we built this chassis and we decided to put all the gearbox, all the gear reduction in the tender rather than in the loco. Conventional way is to put the motor in the tender, drive a shaft through and then put a gearbox in the loco. But we put everything in the tender. What we overlooked was that by magnifying the torque, which is what a gearbox does, we'd also magnified the torque reaction. So as soon as you put any load on this thing, instead of the loco moving forwards, the tender turned upside down.
Yeah.
And
we'd even got a big flywheel in there.
Yeah.
And I bored it out so that it fitted over the motor casing. So you've got a really big flywheel which wrapped around the motor. So there were several features which were useful and fine once we sorted our torque problems out.
But we never did.
No.
Scenery is an art form, and Barry Norman is one of the best in the business. I first met him back in the 80s when he was one of the original tutors at Missenden Abbey. In addition to talking about scenery, Barry Norman is also very well known for his unique method of baseboard construction, and later on we'll be showing you one of the baseboards that was built using his techniques for the layout Missenden St Mary. Barry is an expert on all forms of scenic construction, and in particular trees and grasses and hedgerows and the like. And in the October weekend he'll be having a scenic masterclass covering these topics. Okay, I'd like to introduce Barry Norman, who's been here for many, many years now. He features on a lot of your DVDs already, and you've been working on this piece of 7mm test track. Tell me about it.
Yeah, this is a piece of landscape on which we're going to put some track so that we can photograph models on it during the course. So I've used it so far to demonstrate to my group how to make the form of the land. So I've cut it out of polystyrene, I've shaped it, and then put some foam on the top, which Norman Solomon's now going to lay some track on. And then when we've done that, we're going to put grass on there, and when the grass is dry, paint it and detail it. And in its design, it's built to A2 size so that we can then put a photograph behind as a back scene to the locomotives, so we can photograph them against.
Oh, sounds a really good, interesting project for the weekend.
And hopefully it can stay at Missenden, and then when people bring locomotives next year, they can put them on the track, or bits of rolling stock, and we can record them.
Perfect idea. Good, thank you. Norman Solomon is our track work expert. He's been at the Abbey for 3 years and professionally has laid lots of track in all scales and standards for many layouts, including the Taunton MRC's layout of Bath Green Park. The track work you see on the Missenden St Mary demonstration layout has also been laid by Norman Solomon. Tony Wright is the assistant editor of British Railway Modelling, and Tony has been coming for a couple of years now to teach modellers how to take digital photographs of the models they have built. This was a new departure for us, but there clearly was a demand for this interesting part of our hobby. Since then, Tony has been involved in the locomotive kit construction weekend, and the characteristics of all Tony's courses are that they are very noisy and very enjoyable, and lots of laughter comes from them.
And I am happy with that. That's fine. If you look, well, you can move it. You can just reintroduce the iron and move it if you're not happy.
That exquisite model you have just built deserves a good photograph. If you've ever wondered how the experts, such as Tony Wright and David Cooper, take these wonderful photographs that appear in magazines, then we can show you how. Here we see David Cooper, who is our photographic guru, taking pictures of some models and also using a piece of track that Barry Norman and Norman Solomon have built for just this purpose. Tim Shackleton, who's the editor of Model Railway Journal, is our newest tutor. Last year he ran a course on the detailing and upgrading of ready-to-run stock, and that was very successful. This year he has responded to popular demand to demonstrate weathering of locomotives and rolling stock. Tim first came here last year to show us how to modify ready-to-run locomotives. And although ready-to-run locomotives nowadays are extremely good, they can do with a bit of detailing. So, Tim, could you just tell us what your approach is to modifying ready-to-run stock, and then perhaps you could show us how you weather them to make them even more realistic?
Today's ready-to-run models, as you say, are very high quality, but I think there's still quite a lot you can do to them, not only to improve them, to refine them, to perhaps correct obvious errors of detail, but I think more importantly to personalise them, to suggest that this is a scale model that you have built using your skills, rather than simply something comes out of a box that's exactly the same as 10,000 other models. So I really quite enjoy the process of hacking these things about. I've been doing it for quite a few years now, and it's interesting to show other people what can be done. This is a model I built recently. It's basically a Bachmann crab, but I've added a lot of detailing parts which came from a Brassmaster's upgrade kit, which I worked on with them. Maybe things you can see, a completely new front end, without getting too boring or technical. Crabs had two quite different front ends. The Bachmann one is somewhere in the middle. It's neither one nor t'other. So if you know the loco, you need to have a correct front end. So that's fairly heavy work, but the rest of it is really just perhaps chopping bits off, replacing it with more accurate and certainly finer, more delicate, more scale components. The one we did last year here at Missenden, which is this Ginty from Mr. Langdon's personal commission, is again, it's a very, very good Bachmann model that can be taken to an entirely different level. Once again, the detailing bits come from a Brassmaster's upgrade kit. Simply add the bits that come in the pack, or you can change it, chop it yourself, whatever you see fit. But of course, once you've done it, real locomotives didn't run around with shiny bits of nickel silver all over them, nor did they run around as ready-to-run models out of a box. We have to make them look a bit more realistic, and we can do that with painting, which is what I've been working on today. And here we've got another Ginty, which Chris very kindly put on the chopping block for us. And this was airbrush weathered, took almost an hour start to finish. This, by my standards, is quite a quick production. We can take anything up to 2 days to do it properly, but relatively simple skills. Mostly people ask, oh, what kind of airbrush do you use? Well, I use a very dirty old Badger 150, which is a Ford Mondeo of airbrush. There's nothing special about that. The equipment is neither here nor there. It's about 95% observation. Just look at the real thing, and that will tell you what to do. It's easier that way. Rather than making it up, you just copy reality. What could be simpler? So hopefully this is what I've been imparting this weekend, how to add this extra note of realism to your models. I mean, other things I've been looking at today, this is the absolute top of the range coaches, but in real life things do get a bit dingy, and the mechanical cleaning plants don't always get into the corners, so dirt accumulates. It's my way of looking at things. It's my way of kind of recording reality. Other people may well be perfectly happy with a coach like this, exactly as it comes out of the box, nice and shiny wheels. I'm not. I do this kind of thing to them, but I'm more than happy to show other people how to do it, and they seem to like it.
Well, thank you very much for that. In the old days, of course, one could go down to your local railway station, you could see all these dirty engines, but those days have long gone. What sort of reference material do you use to help people get this
Colour photographs are very useful. I was fortunate in that I started weathering models when I was about 12 or 13. I mean, at my Hornby 3 rail, I used to weather this stuff, and the real steam locomotives, of course, still around in the early 60s. So I became very interested. I could look, I watched, I studied, I saw it, and I suppose now I'm relying on memory. Memory, of course, is very, very suggestible, but memory supported by as many colour photographs as I can find, not just colour photographs in railway albums, but kind of colour photographs of anything, just to see how things actually look rather than how we think they look. That's the secret. Look at reality, not how you imagine it to be.
So you have a large collection of dirty photographs?
A huge collection of dirty photographs.
Ian Rathbone was one of Martin's original tutors back in 1996, and Ian teaches students painting and lining. Like Barry, he has his own DVD from Activity Media. The painting and lining session is always very popular because painting is what makes the model. You can have an indifferent model beautifully painted, and it's going to look a lot nicer than a wonderful model that's been badly painted. Lining is difficult and needs a very steady hand, but Ian makes it look so easy. He teaches it in such a way that students overcome any concerns they may have, and they all produce surprisingly good results with their painting and lining. I've mentioned elsewhere the locomotive kit construction weekend that we run in October. We ran this course because the March weekend was getting oversubscribed, and there were a lot of people who wanted to come on our weekends but couldn't get a place. So this year we now have 4 courses. The big one in March, covering all aspects of railway modelling, the locomotive kit construction course in October, and the scenic masterclass that will run on the same weekend in October. In April we also have the electronics for railway modellers weekend, which we run in conjunction with MERG, the Model Electronic Railway Group. The purpose of this course is to show modellers how modern day electronics can enhance the operation of their model railway. There are things like digital command control that we not only discuss, but we show you how you can build kits from components that we supply to make DCC modules, controllers and accessory decoders and encoders. This is again a very practical course, but it does show people who've not necessarily been involved in the electronic side before what can be done, and there's a lot of help on hand to make sure that modelers go away with some circuitry that can be useful on their layout either at home or in the club. So with the electronics course we now run 4 separate weekends at Missenden Abbey, and we hope that this will become one of the key events in the railway modelling calendar.
Welcome to our 25th anniversary, and we're now going to cut the cake, and hopefully I can divide this by the right appropriate number. For those of you who don't know, it's Caroline, Rose and Rhea. They look after the Abbey, they run the place. So thank you all for coming along. It's been a great weekend so far. I promise this is going to be the last interruption to your model making. So I would, I'm going to cut it, but hopefully Norman can actually do the thing, because Norman apparently used to be a baker. So all right, there we are. Okay.
Baker's cut cake.
Mike's probably got a dividing cake, so we'll get it equally cut.
Happy birthday, we're saying, do we?
The press will lead us in song.
The knife isn't even sharp enough to cut the room. There we are. Right. Norman, do you know how to cut one of these things? It used to be a baker, didn't you? Probably. In the middle.
Maybe this is a good moment for me to congratulate everybody who's been involved with railway modellers here at Missenden Abbey, because to make something like this happen and grow for 25 years is quite an achievement. And it wouldn't have happened without the effort and enthusiasm and passion even of people like Chris and the tutors, and even Martin Brent, who would love to be here for this moment.
Well, we hope that you've enjoyed our DVD to celebrate our 25th anniversary at Missenden Abbey. Hopefully this has shown you what we do, what we learn and how we enjoy ourselves. We have a brilliant uninterrupted weekend of railway modelling, and we hope to see you here soon. Thank you.